Welcome everybody to today's episode of Government Update with Nate. I'm Nate and I'll try to give you all the facts that I can find on politicians and government, and I'll try to give you those facts as straight as humanly possible. Holy election, Batman! Talk about your crazy elections. That one was one for the books. That was an interesting one. I stayed up until 3 a.m. watching the results of everything come through. But on today's episode, we're going in a different direction because Congress is in kind of a lame duck session. There's not a whole lot of action happening currently. If something does happen, I'll be sure to let you know. But what everyone's kind of anxiously awaiting is what's going to happen with the Donald Trump presidency. And what's up next is his transition team, who I'll get to later in the episode, is working on collecting names and shortlisting candidates for the cabinet of the presidency. So today we're going to be reviewing all of the positions of the president's cabinet. The first cabinet position in the line of succession from the president is the Secretary of State, and they handle pretty much the foreign affairs for the president. So they're the one that goes to travel to all sorts of different countries to talk to their counterpart in the foreign country and discuss foreign affairs. The second cabinet member is the Secretary of Treasury. Now what they're handling is pretty much what it sounds like, the financial and monetary policy on a federal level. The third cabinet position is the Secretary of Defense, and they are second only to the United States President in matters of the military. The fourth cabinet position, and the only one without the title of secretary within it, is the Attorney General, and that is the United States lawyer. So if you're hurt in a car, call the Attorney General, Mr. President. No, that's not what it's for, but it's the United States lawyer. Get into some of the weirder ones that not a lot of people have heard of. The Secretary of Interior, it really handles a lot of land management, and something like the National Park Service would fall under the Secretary of the Interior. Everyone's talking about the Secretary of Agriculture, right? Am I right? The Secretary of Agriculture handles all of the agricultural development for the United States, for the Union. That's a lot of farm laws, regulations, subsidies, and they also handle certain aspects of food and safety inspection. The Secretary of Commerce is up next on our list, and they handle fostering and promoting businesses and industries within the United States. They're all about promoting business and industries within the United States, and that is the Secretary of Commerce. Continuing down the list of succession of the president's cabinet, it is the Secretary of Labor, and they handle all of the sort of hot button subjects between businesses and individuals. So a lot of laws around unions and workforce, any sort of regulation in that area, that would fall under the Secretary of Labor. Here's a secretary title that has a lot of words in it. It is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and what they handle are Medicare and Medicaid regulation, and they're the governing body over that. And also under the Affordable Care Act, that role, the Health and Human Services Secretary, has expanded greatly because they handle a lot of things that fall under the Affordable Care Act regulation. Also, they work in coordination with the FDA and the CDC, organizations and bureaucracies like that. Are you looking to be a homeowner? Talk to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, which one of its goals is to increase home ownership and increase community support and things around that sort of area. So that is the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Getting down there on the list is the Secretary of Transportation, and they head up the Federal Highway Program, anything that has to do with transportation on a federal level. The Secretary of Transportation, oh, think of that! They handle that. The Secretary of Energy is next on the list, and before there was an emphasis on like clean energy development, they're really just tasked with the production and regulation of energy, but now there's a huge emphasis on collecting sustainable clean energy within that cabinet's position. Another one that starts with an E. The Secretary of Education, anything that has to do with the federal education program, so the things like No Child Left Behind program, that came from the federal level, and that came from under President George W. Bush's Secretary of Education. Here's an actual hot button secretary position, and that's the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Recently there's been a whole lot of issues with veterans being able to get access to health care, and the VA, the healthcare just in general for veterans has been at a point of contention because it's been poor in a lot of different states. All of that jurisdiction falls within the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Last, but certainly not least, is the Secretary of Homeland Security, which is a fairly new cabinet position within the president's cabinet. It came around shortly after the September 11th attacks with the Homeland Security bill back in 2001. That's when the Homeland Security Secretary was established to really reduce the threat of homeland terrorism. They also handle things like Border Patrol, other immigration. They work pretty closely with the FBI and the CIA. With that, those are all of the positions within the president's cabinet. Now we'll wait with abated breath to see who President-elect Donald Trump selects to fill those positions. One thing that's of note is that each one of those positions has to be first selected by President-elect Donald Trump and then approved by the Senate, not the Congress, by the Senate, in just a simple majority. Before I go, I mentioned at the top of the episode that I was going to be covering President-elect Donald Trump's transition team and who that consists of, who those people are. These are kind of the main figureheads. There are others that are working with under these people, but here are some names that you might remember or seem familiar to you depending on how closely you pay attention to politics and government and all of those other dealings. The first person is actually the chair of the transition team, which is New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Another team member within the transition team is Alabama Republican Senator, that is Jeff Sessions. Another member of Trump's transition team is actually the Trump Transition Executive. He is a former state senator for New Jersey. He's worked with Chris Christie before. Now he acts as a vice president for a pharmaceutical company, and that is former Senator Rich Bagger. The next person on Trump's transition team is somebody that's familiar with the White House. He worked under both presidents George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, and that is attorney William Palatucci. Next position is the presidential appointment, the Trump transition team presidential appointment director, and that is William F. or Bill Hagerty. He worked for Mitt Romney's transition team back when he was running against Barack Obama, and now he started his own merchant bank private equity investment firm that he's working with, but now he is on the Trump transition team and is the director of the presidential appointments part of that team. Rounding out the list for President-elect Donald Trump's transition team into the White House is Jamie Burke. She actually worked under George H.W. Bush as the White House liaison and director of outreach for the Department of Health and Human Services. She also worked on Mitt Romney's transition team. She was serving as a political consultant in D.C., but is now rounding out the list for the Trump transition team. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's post-election episode of Government Update with Nate. The fight is not over just because the election has come and gone. Now is the time to focus in on the policies and current laws that are being debated or that will be debated in the House and the Senate, and I'll be sure to give you all of those facts that I can find moving forward. 2017 is going to be a great year. Everyone enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next time. Signing off.